Long time no talk on the language related videos front. I know, I'm very sorry that I haven't made a video regarding language learning in a very long time. The thing is, I just wasn't very inspired really because I wasn't sure what to make a video on. But I have actually been getting a lot of questions from people asking me how to start reading in Japanese specifically, and I thought I would just make a video on how to start reading in a foreign language in general. Some of these tips will actually be Japanese specific, but I think most of them can be applied to just about any language with some variations, obviously. I hope that this video will be helpful to you if that's the sort of thing that you would like to get into and get started. I think reading can be a very powerful tool with language learning because you're doing something fun and just kind of casually on the side also improving your language skills, so that's pretty awesome. So here are some tips on how to do it. Let's get started with the video. So my first tip is to not start reading right when you start learning a language. Maybe this sounds a little counterproductive and maybe it does work that way for some people, but I remember when I was learning Japanese, I started reading, I tried reading fairly early on, like a book, and it was just so frustrating. I would have to look up literally everything. I was so annoyed at myself and at my skills. I think that ended up having kind of like a counterproductive effect on my language learning motivation and my reading motivation. And obviously by starting to read, I mean like normal books. There's obviously things that are like written for, like little short texts that are written for any language learning level that you will be able to read, especially with a language like Japanese though, is kind of hard in terms of kanji and stuff like that. So that is something that you need to keep in mind to make sure that you pick something to read that is actually adequate to the level that you're at. You will just get super frustrated, and you might think that encountering so many new vocabulary is gonna be good for you, but the truth is that you're not going to remember most of them and you're just gonna be completely frustrated and throw down the book or whatever you're reading and be just not motivated to read. So don't put any kind of pressure on you to think that you have to read like a certain thing already. Make sure that you read something that's on your level where you understand maybe like 70-80% of it. I think for me at least, I would guess that that is my perfect level of reading where I understand most of what I'm encountering, but there will be words that maybe I'll have to look up or I just plain don't understand and I can skip because they don't seem too important to me, to the overall understanding. And this actually leads me to my second point, which is to try and not look every single word up that you don't understand. Again, maybe this sounds counterintuitive to some of you, but the thing is that you will not remember all of these words unless you like literally sit down and learn them, but that's a whole different kind of learning method. In a lot of cases, if there's like a singular vocabulary that you don't understand, but you understand the whole situation, you understand the context, you will either be able to guess or the word wasn't that important in the first place and it doesn't actually matter that much. It won't probably be relevant to you in terms of like real life, so you probably won't read it a lot. You probably don't have to use it a lot, you know. Are obviously sometimes going to be words, even if you read on your level, that are just kind of necessary for the story, but not that important for real life language use, so it's fine to just skip them for now. Eventually, on your track to learning the language, you will probably encounter them and you will read texts where that specific word is going to be more important, so then you still have time to learn it at that point. The situation is different, however, if this one specific word keeps reoccurring. So that's kind of what I like to do. Okay, I really want to know what this means. This is relevant to me right now for my current reading experience, so I will look it up and I will remember it more easily because every time it shows up again, I will have to like think of it again. Whereas if it's just a one-time thing, you maybe looked it up that one time and then immediately went on to something else and it probably went right out of your head again. The next tip is to choose the genre very carefully. One of the more like side reasons of why I got into Japanese in the first place is because I was an avid reader of Detective Conan mangas and I was like, I really want to be able to read this in Japanese one day. The problem is that even Japanese people tell me that Detective Conan is a very difficult manga to read because it is a manga series that involves police and crime and detectives and all that kinds of things, and that means that there's also going to be a lot of police and crime and Yakuza even related vocabulary in there that I maybe haven't encountered before unless I've specifically learned like a themed vocabulary sheet to do with those kind of topics. So this is why I think, regardless what language you're learning, it makes sense to just, for the beginning at the very least, skip a few genres that are inevitably going to come with vocabulary that you most likely will never have seen before, just because the genre demands it. Some of these genres include, as I said, crime, also fantasy, which is probably gonna be more difficult to read, and then also things like sci-fi and tech-related stuff. All those genres I think are great to read and fun to read, but maybe for a beginner and somebody who's just getting into this language, that is not the best place to start, because you're automatically going to have more vocabulary on top of the ones you already don't understand. So to combat that, I recommend reading mainly contemporary books, just where you're most likely to have encountered the vocabulary before in your language classes. Another thing I would recommend is reading books that have also film adaptations made of them, because it is the perfect way of just going back and checking if what you read and understood is even exactly what's happening. Especially if you watched a movie in, like, say if I read a Japanese book and I watched a movie in Japanese, I have the added benefit of also hearing the words and the, you know, maybe the words aren't quite the same, but I've also the added benefit of having like a listening exercise, and I can check with the visuals if this is exactly what I understood from the book. Now on to some tips that are maybe more specific to Japanese. Maybe some of these tips can also be applied to other languages where you have to learn a specific script to read it. The first tip in this category is, I think, to avoid reading children's books, which is something I tried to do at the very beginning when I was literally just starting out, and I thought, children's books are going to be good, they're going to have simple vocabulary, no kanjis or not many kanjis. But wait, that turned out to be the exact problem of why reading those books was basically impossible. Children's books are obviously made for Japanese children to read, and they don't have many kanji in them because the Japanese children don't know the kanji yet, but they know the words when they see them just written in hiragana. The thing is, if you're not a Japanese native speaker or you're not very good at Japanese yet, a lot of these words actually will not have any meaning for you yet, and all you have as a basis for understanding them are hiragana, which basically give you nothing. A lot of times you can sort of guess kanji, especially if you're a little bit more advanced, you can sort of guess what they mean. Maybe all of the on-readings in like one string in hiragana won't make sense, but if you put it together in kanji form, you can sort of guess what they mean. Also, I think that kanji are more easy to look up, because a lot of the times a hiragana word will have kind of more than one corresponding kanji to it, and then it's kind of hard to pick the right kanji and the right meanings. It can happen the other way around too, where you don't know which part of the kanji meaning like literally applies in the situation, but the meanings are always very similar, and it usually doesn't really matter if you get it all like not quite right every single time. And then this is more for like advanced people that are already like a little bit higher up. I recommend reading books that don't have too many furigana on them. It can be tempting to do it, you know, but it is really important that you read the kanji yourself. It's just too tempting if you have the little hiragana written on top of the kanji that you just like your eyes will immediately go to that instead of making your brain read the actual kanji. Like manga, for example, they always tend to have furigana written on top of the kanji. While that may be helpful if you don't know enough kanji quite yet, if your kanji knowledge is a little bit more advanced, I recommend just skipping the furigana. If you don't know kanji, just look it up and make yourself read it. And this gets us to the next tip, which is to read the kanji aloud, or at least aloud in your head. Also try to think about exactly how they are pronounced. There's some kanji that I learned once, like maybe a year ago, and I've forgotten exactly how to read them, but I remember the meaning. So it's very tempting to just kind of skip them because I'm like, I know what this means. But it's important that you also know how to say it, because otherwise this is a vocabulary that you technically kind of know how to write, but you don't know how to say, and that's kind of pointless. This can actually be, again, applied to kind of everything, but it applies more, I think, to kanji, again, because it's so important that you say it out loud and that you make yourself more comfortable with the reading of kanji, is to read aloud, actually. I think, first of all, you can improve your own pronunciation. You can work on the flow of the language. Not every language is read the same way in terms of like emphasis on or when to take breaks in the middle of the sentence and stuff like that. That's definitely something that you should practice in any language, basically. And especially with kanji, again, it's gonna make you hear the word as well as read it and think of the meaning, and all of that connected is gonna make you remember all parts of it a lot better than if you just see it and kind of move on again. Now I know that this might all sound like a lot of work, like a lot of extra things that you have to be aware of and that you have to do, but at the end of the day I do think that they're all beneficial and that they're going to improve your language skills as well as your reading experience, because you're gonna be much more in the flow, you're gonna be much more in the story itself and be able to appreciate what's written as well as remembering the new knowledge that you are also encountering while reading. I hope that this video was helpful to some of you. If you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to leave them in the comments down below. Also, don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it and click the subscribe button for more videos coming soon. Have a lovely week. Bye!